My name is Declan O'Rourke, and I'm 67 years old. I worked as a mechanic at an agricultural machinery factory in Denver for 38 years, and I have been retired for 5 years now. I live with my wife, Myrna, who is 64 and used to be a nurse at the city hospital. We have two children, our son Kyle, who is 42 and works as a mechanic and loves motorcycles, and our daughter Hazel, who is 38 and works as a cashier at a large supermarket. Hazel is married to Trent, and they have a 10-year-old daughter named Scarlett. We live in a small house in the Highlands, not far from the city center. That Saturday in early September began as usual. I woke up at 6:30 in the morning, as always. 40 years of factory work had not gone away, even after 5 years of retirement. Myrna was still asleep, so I quietly went to the kitchen and made some coffee. I love those quiet moments in the morning when I can read yesterday's newspaper and think about the day ahead. The newspaper reported on rising gasoline prices and the city's plans to repair the roads in our neighborhood. Just the usual news, nothing special. After breakfast, I went to pick up my granddaughter to take her for a walk in the park. It's only a 12-minute walk to Hazel's house through the residential neighborhood. I like our neighborhood. The houses are small but well kept, and each has its own garden. The neighbors know each other by sight and say hello when they meet. It's not like in the new neighborhoods where people live next door to each other for years and never talk. Mrs. Harrison was watering her flowers by the porch and waved to me. Old Mr. Collins was walking his fat Labrador who, as always, was pulling on the leash with all his might. Scarlett was waiting for me at the door, already dressed in jeans and a pink jacket with a unicorn on it. That jacket was a birthday present from Myrna and me 2 months ago. My granddaughter loved it and wears it almost every day, even when it's too warm outside. "Grandpa, are we going to play soccer today?" she asked, grabbing my hand. "Of course, Princess. Did you bring the ball?" She nodded and showed me a small soccer ball that she was holding tightly under her arm. I bought her that ball 2 months ago when we first went to play in the park. Scarlett saw other children kicking the ball around on the lawn and wanted to try it too. At first, she just kicked it with the toe of her boot, but gradually she learned to kick the ball with the inside of her foot, just as I had taught her. We headed toward Highland Park, which was only 3 blocks from their house. On the way, Scarlett told me about school, how Jason Miller got a B in math yesterday for not knowing his multiplication tables, and how Miss Anderson promised to hold a contest for the best Halloween drawing. The morning was cool, typical of a Colorado autumn, and there was already a hint of winter in the air. The leaves on the trees were beginning to change color, yellow, orange, and red spots among the green. In a month, all this splendor would fall, and the long winter would begin. But for now, it was still possible to enjoy the warm days and walks without heavy jackets. The park wasn't too crowded at this time of day. A few young mothers pushed strollers along the paved paths, and an elderly couple fed ducks at a small pond. Somewhere in the distance I could hear children's voices on the playground and the creaking of swings. I like this park. It's not as big as City Park in the center, but it's quiet and cozy. It has everything you need: walking paths, a pond with ducks, several sports fields, and a large lawn for games. The city authorities keep it in good condition. The grass is mowed regularly, the paths are cleaned, and the benches are painted. We found a free lawn away from the paths and started playing. Scarlett was quite agile for her age, although she sometimes missed the ball, which made her giggle. She tried to copy my movements, passing the ball with the inside of her foot, stopping it in front of her before passing it. Sometimes she did very well. "Grandpa, did you really play soccer in school?" she asked as we tossed the ball back and forth. "I did, but I wasn't very good. I liked working with my hands better than running around on the field, and the coach preferred taller, faster kids. Dad says sports are stupid, that it's better to do something useful." I grimaced. Trent really did have a habit of making categorical judgments about everything. Lately, though, he had become nervous and distracted. Hazel complained that he wasn't sleeping well, that he was always thinking about something and making plans. What does your mom say about sports? Mom says it's good for your health and that I need to move more, not just sit on my tablet. Mom's right. Movement is life. We spent about an hour and a half in the park. Scarlett was tired, her cheeks red from running, and we slowly made our way back. She told me about her math teacher, who she said was too strict and gave too much homework, and about her new friend Emma, who had recently moved from California and could do really pretty pigtails. She also complained that the boys in her class were silly and always pulling the girls' hair. You should fight back, I advised. Grandpa, Scarlett exclaimed indignantly. Mom said we're not allowed to fight. Well, then tell your teacher. She can talk to them. I already did. She said the boys pull the girls' hair because they like them. That's nonsense, I grumbled. In my day, they got a slap on the back of the head for that. When we approached Hazel's house, I heard voices coming from the kitchen. Through the open window, I could hear my daughter and son-in-law talking. The tone was tense, and I involuntarily slowed my pace. I don't like to interfere in family matters, but when it comes to my daughter and granddaughter, I always listen carefully. Grandpa, let's go, said Scarlett, but I stopped at the porch. Wait a minute, Princess. Let Grandpa catch his breath. Trent's voice sounded agitated and a little irritated. Hazel, this is our chance. Opportunities like this don't just come along. I've been studying the market for 6 months, talking to people. But $25,000. His daughter's voice was quiet and worried. That's a lot of money, Trent. We don't make that much in a year. I've done the math. A used appliance store in that neighborhood is sure to be a hit. Look for yourself. People are always looking for cheap TVs, refrigerators, washing machines, and I know suppliers who give good prices. Plus, the repairs aren't complicated, mostly cleaning and replacing small parts. What if it doesn't work out? What then? It will work out. I'm not stupid. I've calculated everything and studied the competition. There's only one second-hand appliance store in that neighborhood, and it's not doing well. The owner is old, there's no advertising, and the products aren't cleaned. I frowned. Trent had tried various get-rich-quick schemes more than once. 2 years ago, he sold some dietary supplements online, buying them in bulk and reselling them on his website. Then he tried selling used cars, also online. None of it made him much money, but he didn't lose much either. But a loan of $25,000 is serious. Scarlett tugged at my sleeve. Grandpa, I want to show Mom how I scored a goal today. Right now, Princess. We climbed the steps and entered the house. Hazel and Trent were sitting at the kitchen table with some papers and an open laptop in front of them. My daughter looked tired with dark circles under her eyes, while my son-in-law, on the contrary, was excited and nervously fidgeting with a pen. There were 2 half-empty cups of coffee on the table. Hi, Dad, said Hazel, getting up to hug Scarlett. How was your walk? Mom, I scored 2 goals against Grandpa, her granddaughter announced happily. And I learned how to stop the ball with my foot like a professional soccer player. Well done. Go wash your hands and change your clothes, then tell us all about it. Scarlett ran off to her room and I remained in the kitchen. Trent stood up and extended his hand to me. Declan, how are you? You look great. Sports are great. Thanks. How are you? You seem to be discussing something important. Hazel glanced at her husband and he nodded. It was clear that they were discussing whether to let me in on their plans. Actually, Dad, we were just about to talk to you. Trent has a great opportunity to start his own business. Trent immediately perked up and pulled his laptop closer to him. Imagine, Declan, a used electronics store. I found a great location on Colfax Avenue and the rent is reasonable, $800 a month. And there's a huge demand for cheap electronics right now. The economy isn't that stable. People are saving money, but they can't live without a refrigerator or a TV. And how much will it cost? I asked, even though I had already heard the figure through the window. $25,000 for the down payment, renovating the space, and purchasing the first batch of goods. The bank has already approved the loan, and all the paperwork is ready. All we need to do is sign. Trent turned his laptop toward me. The screen showed a table with figures, estimated expenses and income, a business development plan. Everything looked very neat and professional, but I knew that pretty tables don't guarantee success. I sat down on a chair and looked closely at the documents. Bank papers always look solid and impressive, but they often hide unpleasant surprises. A loan agreement, income statements, a 20-page business plan. Do you have any experience in sales? Well, I sold electronics at Best Buy for 3 years, Trent said, a little embarrassed. Plus, I worked at an online auto parts store for a year. And besides, it's not rocket science. You buy cheap, sell high. Working in a store and running your own business are two different things. There, the goods were delivered to you, and customers were brought in by advertising. Here, you have to do everything yourself. I understand, but I have a plan. Advertising in local newspapers, flyers in mailboxes, plus word of mouth. If you repair the equipment well, customers will recommend you to others. Where will you get the goods? I have contacts. A friend of mine works for Techno Demontage. They buy equipment from insurance companies after accidents and fires. Most of the goods are in good condition. They just need to be cleaned or slightly repaired. The prices are 3 to 4 times lower than in stores. Hazel listened carefully to the conversation. She was clearly nervous, but she supported her husband. Dad, we understand that it's a risk, but Trent has been working for peanuts for a long time, and now there's a chance to change something. Maybe in a couple of years we'll have our own house instead of this rented apartment. I was silent, thinking about what I had heard. Of course, everyone has the right to try to improve their life. When I was young, I dreamed of starting my own business, but back then I had no money, no connections, and no experience. But what Trent was saying sounded too optimistic. A used appliance store on Colfax Avenue wasn't the most prestigious neighborhood. There were a lot of poor people there, and contacts for suppliers. In my life, I've seen many people who promised mountains of gold thanks to their connections and acquaintances. When are you planning to open? As soon as the bank transfers the money. I think we'll be able to welcome our first customers in 2 or 3 weeks. The premises are almost ready. We just need to clean up a bit and put up some shelves. What about the competition? Have you looked into that? Of course. There are only 2 second-hand appliance stores within a 5-kilometer radius. One of them is poorly run. It's dirty, the owner is old, and there's no advertising. The other one is more expensive. They sell refurbished appliances at almost the same price as new ones. What if it doesn't work out? I asked bluntly. What if sales don't go as planned? $25,000 is no joke. Trent hesitated for a second, then replied with feigned confidence. If it doesn't work out, well, then we'll look for other options. We can sell the goods wholesale and get at least some of the money back, but I'm sure it will work out. I've got it all figured out. At that moment, Scarlett ran into the kitchen in her home clothes. Grandpa, are you staying for lunch? Mom said she's making macaroni and cheese. No, Princess, I have to go home. Grandma is waiting for me. We were going to go to the store. It was a little white lie. Myrna and I weren't going anywhere, but I wanted to leave and think things over. The atmosphere in the house was tense, and I felt that my presence was only adding to the discomfort. I got up and kissed my granddaughter and daughter. Trent walked me to the door. Declan, I understand your doubts. It's normal to be cautious at your age, but sometimes you have to take risks to achieve something. Otherwise, you'll end up working for your uncle your whole life. Sometimes you have to, I agreed. The main thing is that the risk doesn't become too costly for the family, and that if you fail, You have something to eat and a place to live." "Everything will be fine," Trent said, but I heard uncertainty in his voice. I went outside and headed home. The sun had risen higher and it was noticeably warmer. I took off my light jacket and hung it on my arm. As I passed the gas station on the corner of 38th and Highlands, I heard the familiar roar of motorcycles. 7 bikes were heading my way, and in front was my son Kyle on his black Harley-Davidson. When he saw me, he signaled to the others, and the whole group pulled over to the curb. Kyle took off his helmet, his long, dark hair tied back in a ponytail, and the Mountain Wolves Motorcycle Club patches were visible on his leather jacket. A duffel bag was strapped to the back of his bike. They were probably going on a long trip. "Hey, old man," he said, getting off his motorcycle. "Where are you headed?" "I'm coming from Hazel's. I was taking my granddaughter for a walk in the park." "How's your sister?" "Same old, Trent starting another business." Kyle grimaced. He had never hidden his feelings for his brother-in-law. He considered him a frivolous talker who planned more than he did. "Again? What is it this time?" "He wants to open a used equipment store." "He took out a loan." "How much?" "25,000. Kyle whistled. "Wow. Does he even know anything about business, or is he just hoping for the best again?" The other bikers waited patiently, some smoking and chatting among themselves. I knew most of them. They were good guys who just loved freedom and speed. Among them was Bradley, a tall guy in his 30s who worked as a welder on a construction site. Next to him stood Marcus, a black veteran who had lost a leg in Afghanistan but still never parted with his motorcycle. There were others too, mechanics, truck drivers, ordinary working people for whom a motorcycle was not just a means of transportation, but a way to feel free. "Ah," I said, looking at the motorcycles. "It reminds me of my youth. Remember I told you about my Triumph?" "Of course I remember. You've told me 100 times," Kyle laughed. "But the guys haven't heard it." "Well, I'll tell you the 101st time," I winked at Bradley. "It was 1974. I was 22 and had just married Myrna. I bought a used 1971 Triumph Bonneville, red as a fire truck. I paid $1,500 for it, which was a lot of money back then. I thought I'd look like Marlon Brando in The Wild One." "And how did that work out?" Bradley asked with a smile. "I fell off it 3 times in the first month. Once I even ended up in a ditch. I was trying to pass a truck and the road was wet. Myrna said, 'It's either the motorcycle or me.' I had to choose." "You made the right choice," said Kyle. "Although sometimes I regret not knowing you back then. It would have been cool to ride together. Come on, but now you ride better than I ever could. And your bike is better than my old Triumph." "What happened to it?" Marcus asked. "I sold it 6 months after we got married. Myrna was pregnant with Kyle, and we needed money for a crib and a stroller. I still regret it sometimes." We talked for a few more minutes about motorcycles and the bikers' plans for the weekend. They were going to the mountains to a lake where several clubs were meeting. Then Kyle looked at his watch. "We gotta go, old man. We want to get there before dark. Drive safe, and say hi to the others." Kyle waved at me, put on his helmet, and started the motorcycle. The whole group took off and disappeared into the stream of other cars heading for the mountains. I watched them go and thought about how my son had found his place in life. He had a job he liked, friends, and a hobby. But things with Hazel were getting more complicated. Myrna greeted me when I got home. She was cooking dinner and the whole house was filled with the smell of roasted chicken with herbs and mashed potatoes. Soft music was playing in the living room, some old Frank Sinatra song. "How's your granddaughter?" she asked without turning from the stove. "Great. She's learning to play soccer and telling me all about school, but things are strange with Hazel and Trent." Myrna turned to me with a worried look on her face. "What's wrong?" I told her about my brother-in-law's plans and the loan, how they had discussed the business plan and my doubts. Myrna listened attentively, shaking her head from time to time and asking clarifying questions. 25,000, she said finally, sitting down across from me at the table. That's more than half of what they earn in a year together. Exactly. And if it fails, they'll be paying it off for 10 years, maybe even more, with interest. What do you think? Maybe he'll succeed. Maybe we're worrying for nothing. I shrugged. I don't know, Myrna. Maybe he will. But the way he talks about it worries me. He's too confident, too casual, as if trading is something simple. And I know people who've been in business their whole lives and still can barely make ends meet. But people do business and make money somehow. Take Jimmy McDonald, for example. He opened an auto repair shop 15 years ago, and now he has 3 branches. People trade, but most of them study the business first, work in the field for years, and understand what's what. Trent, he just decided he could do it, based on the fact that he sold televisions in a shopping mall for 3 years. Myrna set the plates on the table and laid out the napkins. Did Hazel seem nervous? Yes, she's clearly worried. You can tell she has doubts, but she supports her husband. She doesn't want to upset him. Of course she supports him. She's his wife. And besides, maybe she's tired of always being short of money. We ate in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. A flock of birds flew past the window, heading south. Winter is coming, I thought. It would be nice to have a steady job and a roof over my head by winter instead of loans and dubious business ventures. The following Tuesday, I met Otis Graves as usual at Sally's Cafe on Tennyson Street. We've been friends for almost 40 years, having met at the factory when he worked in the delivery department. Otis is 2 years older than me, but he looks younger, tall, fit, with a gray mustache that he trims carefully every week. Since retiring, he has taken up gardening and now grows the best tomatoes in the neighborhood. Sally's is a small family-run cafe that's been around for 20 years. It's nothing special: plastic tables, old chairs, the smell of fried bacon and coffee. But it's always quiet, you can talk in peace, and Sally makes excellent roast beef sandwiches. On Tuesdays, we have a tradition of meeting at 2 in the afternoon, ordering coffee and playing dominoes. Otis was already sitting at our usual table by the window, laying out the dominoes. In front of him was a cup of black coffee and a half-eaten piece of apple pie. "Hi, Declan. How's it going?" he greeted me without looking up from the tiles. "Fine. How about you? Does your wife ever complain about your daily trips to the cafe?" Dorothy understands that an old man needs to get out of the house sometimes, and she feels better knowing where to find me. I ordered coffee and sat down across from him. Otis had already mixed the knuckle bones and started handing out 7 to each of us. We play by simple rules, no tricks. Whoever gets rid of all their knuckle bones first wins. "How's your granddaughter?" Otis asked, placing the first knuckle bone with 2 6s on the table. "She's growing up." We went to the park on Saturday and played soccer, but I'm having problems with my son-in-law. What does that Trent come up with now? He took out a loan, $25,000. He wants to open a used appliance store. Otis paused, the dice with 3 and 6 frozen in his hand. "Are you serious? 25,000? Serious. He's already made arrangements with the bank and will be signing the papers in a few days. Does he have any experience?" "What experience? He sold televisions at Best Buy for 3 years. He thinks that's enough." Otis put down the dice and shook his head. "I remember when my brother Ray decided to go into business. He opened a sporting goods store in '78. He thought that since he was into fishing, he could sell fishing tackle. A year and a half later, he was bankrupt. He spent another 10 years paying off the loan." "Exactly, but Trent is sure he'll make it. He says he's studied the market and checked out the competition." "What does Hazel think?" "She supports her husband, although you can see she's worried." We played in silence for about 15 minutes. Otis was winning. He had only 2 knuckles left, and I had 5. But I was more concerned about my brother-in-law than the game. "You know what?" I said suddenly. "Let's go check out the place he's renting. Trent said it's on Colfax Avenue." I wonder what it's like. What for? Otis asked, surprised. Just curious. I want to understand what he's getting himself into. Maybe I'm worrying for nothing, and it's a really good place. Colfax Avenue is long. There are some decent neighborhoods there and some not so good. That's why I want to see it. Otis won the game and started gathering the dice. Okay, let's go. We've got nothing else to do. We just need to find out the address. I called Hazel from the cafe phone. I explained that I wanted to see the place to get a better idea of Trent's plans. My daughter gave me the address, 4823 Colfax Avenue. That's almost out of town, Otis said, writing down the address. That's where the industrial area starts. We got into my old Ford Taurus and drove west on Colfax. The road was familiar. I had driven this way to the factory for many years, only turning earlier. At first, we drove through the central part of town, past shops, restaurants, and office buildings. But the further west we went, the poorer the neighborhoods became. Abandoned houses, junkyards, and warehouses appeared. I don't like this road, Otis said, looking at the buildings passing by. Too many empty storefronts. I don't like it either. Look, half the stores are closed. We drove past several shopping centers that were clearly not doing well. The large parking lots were half empty, and many storefronts were boarded up with newspapers or plywood. One building had a "For Rent" sign with a phone number. Here's our address, Otis said, pointing to a long, single-story building on the right. I pulled over to the curb and turned off the engine. We got out of the car and walked closer. The building really did look like an old warehouse. Brick walls, a flat roof, large windows, some of which were boarded up. Next door was an auto repair shop that also looked abandoned and a used auto parts store. Fun place, Otis muttered. The space Trent was planning to rent was at the end of the building. An old sign reading "Electronics and Appliances" hung above the entrance, but the letters were peeling and half the words were illegible. The window was covered with old newspapers from the inside. Looks like someone used to sell appliances here, I remarked, and went out of business. The question was why. We walked around the perimeter of the building. At the back was a small courtyard littered with trash and rusty scrap metal. The fence was crooked, and some sections had fallen down. In the corner of the courtyard stood an old car without wheels, overgrown with grass. Declan, are you sure Trent saw this place? Otis asked. He said he did, but maybe he only saw it from the inside. We returned to the entrance. The door was locked, but there was a hole in the glass, covered with tape. We could see inside through it. The room was quite large, probably about 150 square meters, but it looked neglected. The walls needed painting, the floor was dirty, and old fluorescent lights hung from the ceiling, half of which didn't work. It'll need some serious repairs, said Otis, and that's extra expense. I wonder if Trent factored that into his calculations. We stood there for a few more minutes, looking around. There wasn't much traffic on the road, mostly trucks and old cars. There were almost no pedestrians. The nearest bus stop was about 200 meters away, and it didn't look very inviting. Broken glass and graffiti-covered walls. You know what worries me the most? I said, returning to the car. What? If someone sold appliances here before and closed down, it means there's no demand, or the competition is too strong, or the owner just didn't know how to sell. Maybe, but still, it's not a great location. We got in the car and drove back. On the way, Otis told us how his nephew had tried to open a car wash in a similar neighborhood and also failed. According to him, the main problem was that people in such neighborhoods prefer to save money on everything, even car washes. And equipment is a special kind of product, he added. People don't buy it every day, and when they do, they want to be sure it won't break down in a month. Exactly. Who's going to believe in the quality of equipment bought in a place like that? When we got back to town, I decided to stop by Hazel's. I wanted to talk to her about what we had seen. Maybe she didn't know what the place looked like, and it was worth telling her. Trent wasn't home. Hazel said he had gone to the bank to sign some final documents. Scarlett was doing her homework at the kitchen table, carefully tracing letters in her copybook. Her daughter looked tired but tried to smile. "Dad, how are you? You're home early today." "Just running some errands with Otis. Hazel, can I talk to you?" "Sure. Scarlett, go to your room and finish your homework." "But Mom, I'm almost done." "Go on, honey. You can finish later." Her granddaughter gathered her notebooks with a frown and went to her room. Hazel sat down across from me and poured tea from the teapot. "What did you want to talk about?" "Otis and I went to look at the place Trent is thinking of renting." "How is it?" My daughter's voice sounded wary. "Hazel, it's a very bad location. The neighborhood is run down, the building is old, and it's surrounded by warehouses and junkyards. Who's going to go there to buy equipment?" My daughter frowned. "Dad, why did you go there? Did Trent ask you to?" "He didn't, but I'm worried about you. $25,000 is a lot of money. We understand that, but Trent has thought it through. He says that it's in neighborhoods like this that people are looking for cheap appliances." "Hazel, I've worked with ordinary people my whole life. Yes, they're looking for cheap stuff, but they also want quality. And who's going to believe in the quality of equipment bought in a dilapidated warehouse? You don't even know what the store will look like after the renovation. I know how much the renovation will cost, and I doubt Trent included those expenses in his business plan." Hazel stood up and began to pace nervously around the kitchen. "Dad, I don't understand what you want from us. We live from paycheck to paycheck. Trent makes $1,200 a month. I make $800. We have to pay for the apartment, food, clothes for Scarlett. We never have enough money." "I understand." "No, you don't." Her daughter's voice grew louder. The conversation was taking an unpleasant turn. Hazel was clearly upset, and my words only annoyed her more. "Hazel, please calm down. I don't want to argue with you. Then support us, or at least don't get in the way." "I'm not getting in the way of anyone. I'm just expressing my opinion." Scarlett appeared in the room with her unfinished homework in her hands. "Mom, why are you shouting?" "We're not shouting, sweetheart. We're just having a discussion." "Grandpa, won't you take me for walks anymore?" asked his granddaughter fearfully. "Of course I will, Princess. Your mother and I are just talking about grown-up things." Hazel took her daughter by the hand. "Scarlett, go to your room. Grandpa and I will be done soon." When her granddaughter left, an awkward silence hung in the air. Hazel stood by the window, looking out at the street. I could tell she was upset, but I didn't know how to fix the situation. "Hazel, I don't want to upset you. I just what, Dad?" She turned to me with a tired look on her face. "You just don't believe in us, do you?" "It's not about belief. It's about reality. And the reality is that we're tired of living in poverty. If there's a chance to change that, we're going to take it. Even if that chance could make things worse." "It can't get any worse, Dad. It's already as bad as it gets." She said it with such bitterness that I felt a twinge in my heart. Were things really that bad for them? Or was it just emotion? "Hazel, if you need help—" "We don't need help," she replied sharply. "We need support, and we don't have it." Support and approval are two different things. To me, they're the same thing. I realized the conversation had reached a dead end. Hazel was determined, and my arguments only angered her. "Okay," I said, standing up. "I'll go. But promise me one thing. If there are any problems, come to me. Don't be shy." "There won't be any problems," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I said goodbye to Scarlett and left the house. I felt heavy-hearted. On the one hand, I understood my daughter. It's hard to live paycheck to paycheck, especially when you have a child. On the other hand, I saw what they were getting themselves into, and it scared me. When I got home, I told Myrna about my trip with Otis and my conversation with Hazel. My wife listened attentively, shaking her head from time to time. "Maybe you were too categorical," she asked. "Maybe, but I can't keep quiet when I see them making a mistake." Maybe it's not a mistake. Maybe they'll really make it. Myrna, you should see the place. I don't understand who would go there to buy appliances. Well, maybe it will look better after the renovations. Renovations cost money, a lot of money, and I doubt Trent has taken that into account. Myrna poured us some tea and sat down next to us. Declan, maybe you should just let it go. Let them try. They're adults after all. Easy to say, let it go. What if it doesn't work out? What if they're left with debts? Then we'll help them as best we can. What if we can't do enough? Then they'll manage somehow. People do. I finished my tea and looked out the window. It was getting dark outside, and the streetlights were coming on. Somewhere out there, in a rented apartment, my daughter was dreaming of a better life and preparing to risk everything for that dream. And I was sitting in my house, worrying about how it would all turn out. 4 months flew by quickly. Autumn turned to winter, the first snow fell, and then the thaw came. January in Colorado was surprisingly mild. The temperature rarely dropped below -5, and the snow melted quickly on the roads. During that time, Hazel and I hardly spoke. After that conversation in November, our relationship became strained. My daughter was clearly upset with me for not supporting Trent's plans. When I came to pick up Scarlett, we limited ourselves to formal pleasantries about the weather and our health. Hazel was emphatically polite, but cold. Trent, meanwhile, had indeed opened his store. In early October, he proudly told everyone who would listen about his new business. He even called Myrna and invited her to come see Techno Service, as he had named his enterprise. But my wife and I didn't go. We didn't want to pretend that we approved of his venture. I got bits and pieces of information about how my son-in-law was doing, either from neighbors or from acquaintances who happened to pass by his shop. The news wasn't very good. Old Frank Miller, who lives across the street, said to me one day, "I saw your son-in-law on Colfax. He's standing outside his shop, smoking. There don't seem to be any customers. And Mr. Collins, walking his Labrador, said, 'I drove by last weekend. The parking lot was empty and the lights were off. Maybe they don't work on weekends?' But I tried not to listen to these conversations and not to jump to conclusions. After all, a new business needs time to get up to speed. Maybe things would work out for Trent. In mid-January, something happened that dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's. I was sitting at home reading the newspaper when our neighbor, Mrs. Harrison, rang the doorbell. She was an elderly woman in her 70s who knew everything that happened in the neighborhood before it happened. "Declan, can I come in for a minute?" she asked, standing in the doorway with her cheeks red from the cold. "Of course, Dorothy. Come in. Myrna, put the kettle on." Mrs. Harrison sat down on the sofa and took off her mittens and scarf. She looked agitated and ready to share some important news. "Declan, I don't know if I should tell you this, but I was at my niece's house on Colfax Avenue this morning. You know, she lives not far from where your brother-in-law was opening his shop." My heart sank, but I tried to remain calm. "And?" "The shop is closed, permanently. There's a sign on the door saying closed for technical reasons, and my niece says no one has been there for 2 weeks. Myrna brought tea and sat down next to us. Her face showed that the news did not surprise her. "What do the neighbors say?" my wife asked. "The neighbors say that things have been going badly for him from the beginning. There were few customers, mostly local drunks who tried to steal something. In December, they stopped coming altogether. My niece saw him come by several times, standing at the entrance, smoking, and then driving away." "I see," I said quietly. "Declan, I didn't want to upset you, but I thought it was better to know the truth." "Thank you, Dorothy. You did the right thing." After the neighbor left, Myrna and I sat in silence. Snow fell slowly outside the window, covering the street with a white blanket. "What are we going to do now?" my wife asked. "Nothing. We'll wait for them to come back." "What if they don't?" "They will. $25,000 isn't the kind of money you can just forget about." Myrna got up and began clearing away the teacups. "I feel sorry for Hazel." "So do I. But what could I have done? Forbid them to take out a loan? You could have supported them. Maybe then Trent would have been more motivated to see it through. Myrna, support and money are two different things. No amount of support will make people buy goods from a bad place. Maybe you're right, but it's still a shame. 2 more weeks passed before I saw Hazel again. On Saturday morning, I came to pick up Scarlett for our walk as usual. In winter, we didn't go to the park but to the ice rink at the sports center. My granddaughter was learning to skate and she was doing pretty well. My daughter opened the door and I knew right away that something was wrong. Hazel looked terrible, pale with dark circles under her eyes, and she had lost weight. Her hair was unwashed and tied back in a messy ponytail. "Hi, Dad," she said quietly. "Hi. Is Scarlett ready?" "She's in her room, getting ready. Dad, can we talk?" "Of course." We went into the kitchen. There were papers on the table, bills, letters from the bank. Hazel sat down and covered her face with her hands. "Dad, we have a problem," she said without looking up. "I know about the store." "How?" "The neighbors saw it. They say it's closed." Hazel looked up, and I saw that her eyes were red from crying. "Yes, it closed. 2 months ago. Trent tried to keep it going for another month, but it didn't work out." "What exactly happened?" "There were no customers. None at all. We sold $800 worth of appliances in the first month. That didn't even cover the rent." "Where did you get the goods?" "From the same guy Trent told me about. It turned out that the appliances were in much worse condition than promised. Half of them didn't work at all, and the rest needed serious repairs." "Where did you get the money for repairs?" "We didn't have any money for repairs. Trent tried to fix it himself, but he couldn't. He ruined one refrigerator completely." Hazel stood up and walked over to the window. Snowflakes swirled slowly outside. "And then the rent problem started. The landlord demanded money for utilities that Trent hadn't included in his calculations. It turned out that heating and electricity had to be paid separately." "How much was that?" $400 a month in winter, plus $800 for rent. That's a total of $1,200 in fixed expenses on an income of $800. "Where is Trent now?" "Looking for work." "He's been looking for a month. Best Buy won't take him back. They say they don't have any openings." Scarlett ran into the room in her winter coat, holding her skates. "Grandpa, I'm ready. Let's go skating." "Just a minute, Princess. Let me talk to your mom for a couple more minutes." "Scarlett, go to your room," said Hazel. "Your grandfather and I will be done soon." Her granddaughter pouted but obeyed. When she left, Hazel turned to me. "Dad, we need help." "What kind of help?" "The bank is demanding payment on the loan. $670 every month. We don't have that kind of money. Trent is out of work and my salary is only enough for food and rent." "How much do you owe?" "We've missed 3 payments. The bank is threatening to take us to court." Hazel sat down at the table and picked up a letter. "They can garnish our wages or force us to sell everything we own." "What do you have?" "A car, furniture, a TV, but none of that is worth much. Maybe $5,000. "And the other 20,000? That's why I'm asking you for help." There was a heavy pause. I understood where the conversation was going, and I felt uneasy. "Hazel, I can't take on your loan. Not the whole loan, at least part of it, 10,000 or 15. I don't have that kind of money." "Dad, you have a house. You can use it as collateral." I shook my head. "Hazel, I'm 67 years old. I can't take out a loan on the house where I live with my mother. But this is an emergency of your own making." The words came out before I could think them through. Hazel turned even paler. My daughter stood up and began pacing around the kitchen. Her hands were shaking. "Dad, you do understand what will happen if the bank takes you to court, don't you? They'll garnish my wages. We won't be able to pay the rent. We'll have to move into some dump." "I understand, and I'm very sorry, but I can't solve your problems with my savings." "What savings?" "Savings are the house, It's all your mother and I have." Hazel stopped and looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. It was a mixture of despair, anger, and disappointment. "I see," she said slowly. "So strangers at the bank are more important to you than your own daughter and granddaughter. It's not about importance, it's about responsibility. You took out a loan without asking my opinion. Now you want me to pay for it." At that moment, her granddaughter ran back into the kitchen. "Mom, what's going on? Why are you shouting?" "Scarlett, go to your room," Hazel said sharply. "But Mom—" "Go to your room," I said. The girl looked at us fearfully and ran to her room. Hazel covered her face with her hands and began to cry. "Hazel, please calm down," I said more gently. "Let's think about what we can do. Maybe there are other options." "What options?" she sobbed. "We've thought of everything. Trent's parents live in another state and are barely making ends meet themselves. There's no one else who can help us." "Have you talked to the bank? Maybe they'll agree to restructure the debt." "We've talked to them. They're willing to lower the monthly payment to $400, but then the loan will be spread out over 15 years. That's better than bankruptcy. $400 every month for 15 years? We'll be destitute until Scarlett grows up. But you'll be able to pay the rent and buy food. What about clothes? What about your daughter's education? What about medical care if someone gets sick?" Hazel wiped her tears and looked at me. "Dad, this is my last request. Please help us. If not with money, then at least with a guarantee. The bank will agree to better terms if we have a guarantor." "Hazel, a guarantee means that if you can't pay, I'll pay. We'll pay. Trent will find a job and we'll pay. What if he doesn't? Or he finds one but wants to go back into business?" "He won't. He's learned his lesson." "Hazel, I can't risk the house. I'm sorry, but I can't." Her daughter's face changed. The tears dried up and were replaced by an expression of cold anger. "I understand," she said quietly. "So we're strangers to you." Hazel walked to the door and called to her daughter, "Scarlett, come here." Her granddaughter appeared in the doorway with tear-stained eyes. "Mommy, are we going skating?" "No, we're not. Grandpa's leaving." "Why?" Hazel took her daughter by the hand and looked me in the eyes. "Because Grandpa is no longer a member of our family. He doesn't want to help us." "Hazel, don't do this," I pleaded. "Scarlett, Grandpa thinks we're to blame for our problems. He's not going to help us." "Grandpa, is that true?" her granddaughter asked in a trembling voice. "No, Princess, that's not true. I love you and your mother." "If you love us, then help us," Hazel said. "And if you won't help us, then don't come here anymore, and don't call us." "Mom, what will happen to our walks?" Scarlett cried. "There won't be any more walks. Grandpa decided that his house is more important than us. I realized that there was no point in staying." Hazel was hysterical and wouldn't listen to reason. "All right," I said. "If that's what you've decided, then so be it." I kissed Scarlett on the top of her head and headed for the door. Hazel followed me. "And don't you dare come back until you're ready to help for real." I put on my jacket and opened the door. I turned around on the threshold. "Hazel, when you've calmed down, think about what you've done today and what your daughter saw." "She saw what her grandfather is like," my daughter replied, and slammed the door shut. I stood on the porch for a few minutes, not knowing what to do. I could hear Scarlett crying through the window. I wanted to go back, hug my granddaughter, and tell her that everything would be okay. But the door was locked, and Hazel was unlikely to open it. At home, I told Myrna what had happened. My wife listened silently, shaking her head from time to time. "Maybe you should have agreed," she asked at the end. "To what? Mortgage the house to cover someone else's debts?" "Not someone else's, our daughter's. Myrna, we have a small pension in this house. If we lose it, we'll be destitute. Who will help Scarlett if she needs it?" "Maybe you're right, but I still feel sorry for the girl." "I do too, but I can't solve other people's problems at the expense of our future." That night, I couldn't sleep for a long time. I could see Scarlett's crying face and hear Hazel's words that I was no longer part of the family. Maybe I had been cruel? Maybe it was worth the risk? But then I remembered the place on Colfax Avenue, Trent's naivety, and the fact that I had warned him about it 4 months ago. No, I decided. I had done the right thing. Cruel, but right. A week passed after that Saturday scandal. It was a difficult, painful week, during which I thought every day about Scarlett and how she cried when her mother forbade her to see me. Myrna was also upset, but unlike me, she didn't think the situation was hopeless. "Declan, we have to do something," she said at breakfast on Wednesday. "We can't just sit around and wait." "What can we do?" Hazel made it clear she doesn't want to see me. She was upset. People say a lot of things when they're upset. I don't think she said anything she didn't mean. She really does think I'm to blame for their problems. Myrna put down her coffee cup and looked at me. Maybe she's right. Maybe we really should help. "Myrna, we've already discussed this. I can't risk the house. Then let's at least try to talk to her. Maybe we can work something out." "She won't talk to me." "She'll talk to me." I didn't refuse to help. After much persuasion, I agreed to let Myrna call Hazel. My wife waited until evening when our daughter came home from work and then dialed the familiar number. I sat nearby and could only hear one side of the conversation, but that was enough to understand how things were going. "Hazel, hi, it's Mom. Yes, I know what happened. No, he didn't ask me to call. Honey, let's talk calmly." Myrna fell silent, apparently listening to her daughter's long tirade. I could see from her face that the conversation wasn't going well. "Hazel, he's not your enemy. Of course, we're worried. But you have to understand, we don't have that kind of money either." Another pause. Myrna shook her head and gestured to me that things were bad. "How's Scarlett? She's asking about her grandfather. I see. Hazel, maybe we could meet and talk without getting emotional?" My wife took the phone away from her ear and looked at it. Apparently, our daughter had hung up. "What did she say?" I asked. "She said that until you change your mind, there's nothing to talk about, and that Scarlett now understands what kind of grandparents she has." "That's all?" "That's all." She hung up. I felt my heart sink. Hazel was clearly turning our daughter against us, and that hurt the most. The next day, Myrna tried again. She called in the morning before Hazel had left for work. "Hazel, please don't hang up. I want to talk about Scarlett. Yes, I understand you're angry, but the girl didn't do anything wrong." This conversation was even shorter than the previous one. Hazel said that Scarlett was doing just fine without us and hung up again. "Maybe we should go over there," suggested Myrna. "And then what? Stand outside the door until she opens it? That won't help." "How about a letter?" "Myrna, the problem isn't how we communicate. The problem is that Hazel wants one thing, for me to pay their debts, and I can't do that." Kyle arrived at our house on Friday evening. He showed up unannounced, parked his motorcycle at the porch, and knocked on the door. He looked gloomy and clearly troubled. "Hi," he said, taking off his leather jacket. "Can we talk?" "Of course, son. Sit down. Mom will make some tea." Kyle sat down at the table and rubbed his face with his hands. It was obvious he'd had a rough day. "I went to see Hazel yesterday," he said without preamble. "How is she?" "Bad, really bad. She looks like a ghost. She's lost 10 pounds. And Trent is completely lost." "Did you find a job?" "Yes. I'm a stocker at the supermarket. $1,000 a month, but it's temporary until I find something better." Myrna brought tea and cookies and sat down next to us. "How's Scarlett?" she asked. "Scarlett wants to know about you, especially about Grandpa. Hazel tells her you don't want to talk to them anymore." "That's not true." "It's not true," Myrna snapped. "I know it's not true. I tried to explain it to her, but she wouldn't listen." Kyle took a cookie but didn't eat it, just crumbled it in his hands. "Dad, I understand your position. It's crazy to risk the house at your age." But Hazel doesn't understand that. To her, you just abandoned them in their time of need. What was I supposed to do? I don't know. Maybe find some kind of middle ground. What kind of middle ground? She asked for $20,000 or a guarantee. I can't give her either. Maybe you could help her out a little? 5,000? 10? Kyle, 5 or 10,000 won't solve the problem. They need to pay off the entire debt or the bank will still take them to court. His son finished his tea and leaned back in his chair. You know what bothers me the most? That this could have been avoided if Trent hadn't been such a stubborn idiot. Kyle, don't, said Myrna. What's done is done. No, Mom, I have to. I tried to talk him out of it too. I went to see him in September after he'd already signed the lease. I told him it was a risky venture, that he'd be better off working another year or two to gain some experience. And what did he say? The same thing he told you, that he'd thought it through, that he knew the market. He even got offended when I suggested we go check out the place together. You went? Yeah, I went. Once in October. Dad, you saw that place. Even I was afraid to ride my motorcycle there. It's a rough neighborhood. Kyle stood up and went to the window. The worst part is that Hazel knew it was a bad deal. I could see it in her eyes, but she supported her husband because he promised her a better life. And now they have a debt of $25,000 and no way to pay it off. The bank has already sent a warning about possible legal action. I know, Hazel told me. And you know what else? Trent blames you for everything. Me? You. He says that if you had supported them from the beginning, things would have worked out, that you jinxed them. That's nonsense. Of course it is. But Hazel believes it, or pretends to. Kyle returned to the table and looked at me. Dad, I'm not asking you to change your mind, but maybe you should at least try to make peace with them. Find a way to communicate despite everything. How? Hazel doesn't want to talk. Through Scarlett. The girl misses her grandfather. Maybe if you went to her school. Kyle, that will only complicate things. Hazel will think I'm turning her granddaughter against her. What about through me? I'll pick Scarlett up on the weekend and bring her to your place. Hazel won't allow it. She will. I already spoke to her. She agreed that her granddaughter needs to see her uncle. Myrna perked up. Really? She agreed? She did, but on one condition: no talk of money or loans, and no attempts to change her mind. All right, I said. Let's do that. Kyle left late in the evening, promising to bring Scarlett over the following weekend. I felt a little better. At least I would get to see my granddaughter. On Tuesday, as usual, I met Otis at Sally's Cafe. My friend noticed my bad mood before we even started playing dominoes. What's the matter? He asked, laying out the tiles. You look like you're at a funeral. I told him about the argument with Hazel, about her demand for money, and how my daughter had forbidden her daughter from seeing me. Otis listened attentively, shaking his head from time to time. That's a tough situation, he said at the end. But you did the right thing. Sometimes I think I shouldn't have. Maybe I should have taken the risk. Declan, do you remember my neighbor Charlie Brown, the one who sold his house and moved into an apartment? The one who did. Do you know why he sold his house? No. Because his son asked him for money for a business. Charlie mortgaged his house and gave his son $30,000. His son lost it all and Charlie couldn't pay the mortgage. The bank took the house. And how is he now? He lives in a one-room apartment, pays $600 in rent out of his $800 pension. And his son found a new job, bought a car, lives a normal life. He doesn't even mention his father's house. I see. That's why you did the right thing. Helping your children is one thing, but risking your own home is something else entirely. We played dominoes for an hour, then Otis suggested we go for a walk. The weather was not bad for February. 3 degrees, sunny, the snow had melted. By the way, he said as we walked down Tennyson Street, I was at the store by the mall yesterday. There are ads on the bulletin board. I saw one. Someone is selling a TV and a refrigerator. Cheap. So what? Just thought maybe your daughter was selling off her stuff, getting ready to move. What do you mean? Well, if the bank is taking them to court, they usually give people advance warning. Maybe they've already received an official notice. My heart sank. I hadn't thought about it, but Otis was right. If the bank was really preparing for legal proceedings, Hazel could have received official documents. Otis, when did you see this notice? Last night, but it's not necessarily them. There are a lot of notices and a lot of people. It's still unpleasant. Declan, why don't you try talking to your daughter? Not about money, just to see how she's doing. She won't talk to me. Just try. Tell her you're worried and want to help, but not with money. In the evening, I finally decided to call Hazel. I dialed the number while Myrna was washing the dishes so my wife wouldn't hear the conversation. The phone rang for a long time, then my daughter answered in a tired voice. Hello? Hazel, it's Dad. Pause. I thought she was going to hang up. What do you want? She asked coldly. I wanted to see how you were doing. How's Scarlett? Things are bad. Scarlett's fine. Hazel, I heard you might be selling things. How did you hear that? It doesn't matter. Is it true? Yes, it's true. We're selling everything we can. We're getting ready for court. When is the court date? In a month, unless we can pay the whole amount by then. How much is that with interest? $27,800. It was more than I thought. Hazel, where will you live if what? If the bank takes you to court? I don't know. We'll find something cheap. Or we'll go to Trent's parents in Texas. Texas? What else can we do? We can't afford anything here. Hazel, it's not that I don't want to help. Don't, Dad. We understand. Goodbye. She hung up, and I was left sitting there with the dead phone in my hands. The situation was even worse than I had thought. A month until the court date, plus a possible move to another state. That meant I could lose not only my daughter, but also my granddaughter. Who were you talking to? Myrna asked, drying her hands with a towel. Hazel, things are really bad for them. I told my wife about the conversation and that they might be moving to Texas. Myrna listened with growing concern. Declan, maybe there's something we can do. Not pay off the entire debt, but at least help with the move. Myrna, if they move to Texas, moving is the least of their problems. But we'll never see Scarlett again. We won't, and that's the worst part. My wife sat down next to me and took my hand. Declan, I understand that you're afraid of losing our home, but maybe it's worth the risk. At least partially? Myrna, if we give them $10,000, it won't solve the problem. And if we give them $27,000, we risk losing our home. What if we take out a loan for less than the full amount? $15,000? And then what? Where would we get the remaining $13,000? I don't know, but at least we'll try. I was silent for a long time, thinking over my wife's proposal. On the one hand, $15,000 wouldn't save Hazel from bankruptcy anyway. On the other hand, it would give them time to find a way out. Okay, I said finally, we'll try, but on one condition. The money is not for Hazel or Trent. It goes straight to the bank to pay off the debt. Agreed. And no guarantees for the remaining amount. Agreed. Then tomorrow I'll go to the bank and find out what conditions they offer for loans secured by real estate. Myrna hugged me. Thank you, Declan. I know this is hard for you. I just hope we don't regret it. That night, I lay awake for a long time, wondering if we had made the right decision. $15,000 was a lot of money for our budget, but on the other hand, this was my daughter and granddaughter. Maybe it was worth the risk, or maybe it would only delay the inevitable, and in 6 months we would find ourselves in the same situation, only with 2 loans instead of 1. In the morning, I decided to talk to Kyle first. I called him at work and asked him to stop by in the evening. Is something wrong? My son asked anxiously. No, I just want to talk to you. It's about Hazel. I'll come over after work. By evening, I had changed my mind several times. Sometimes I thought we had to help. Other times I thought it was a waste of money. Myrna was also nervous, but she tried to support our decision. When Kyle arrived, I told him about my conversation with Hazel and our decision to take out a loan for $15,000. My son listened attentively, then was silent for a long time. "Dad," he finally said, "I understand that you want to help, but I'm afraid it won't help." "Why?" "Because the problem isn't money. The problem is Trent. He hasn't changed. He still thinks that circumstances are to blame for everything, not his decisions." "And what do you suggest?" "Nothing. I'm just not sure it's worth risking your money for someone who doesn't want to take responsibility for his actions." "But it's not just about Trent. It's about Hazel and Scarlett." "I know. That's why I'm struggling. On the one hand, I want to help my sister. On the other hand, I realize that the money could just disappear." We talked late into the night, but couldn't come to a clear conclusion. In the end, Kyle said, "Decide for yourselves. I'll support whatever you decide. Are you still bringing Scarlett over for the weekend?" "Of course." We agreed. After our son left, Myrna and I discussed everything again. We decided to postpone the trip to the bank for a week. Let's see how the meeting with Scarlett goes. Talk to her. Find out how things are at home. Then we'll make a final decision. Exactly 1 week had passed since the scandal at Hazel's house, when she forbade Scarlett from seeing me. 7 days that felt like 7 months. Myrna and I lived in tension, waiting every day for news about our daughter and granddaughter, but there was complete silence. During that week, I couldn't bring myself to go to the bank to take out a loan against the house. Every morning I would get ready and then put it off. Myrna didn't insist, seeing how much I was struggling with the decision. Kyle didn't call either. He probably understood that there was no point in rushing things. We lived in a strange limbo, as if time had stopped. I went about my usual business, reading the newspaper, meeting with Otis, helping Myrna with the housework. But my thoughts kept returning to my daughter and granddaughter. What was happening to them? How were they coping? Had Trent found a permanent job? Had the bank filed a lawsuit? On Monday evening, March 7th, Myrna and I went to bed early. It was a cloudy, rainy day and the mood was gloomy. My wife tossed and turned for a long time, then fell silent. I lay there listening to the wind rustling outside and the rain tapping on the window. Around 2 in the morning, I was awakened by a knock on the door. At first I thought it was the wind slamming the gate, but the knocking continued, insistent, uneven. I got up, threw on my robe, and quietly went downstairs so as not to wake Myrna. "Who's there?" I asked, approaching the door. "Dad, it's me," came Hazel's trembling voice. I quickly unlocked the door and threw it open. Standing on the doorstep were my daughter and granddaughter, soaked to the skin. Hazel was holding a battered suitcase in one hand and clutching Scarlett, who was quietly sobbing, to her chest with the other. Both their faces were pale, their eyes red from crying. "Hazel! Scarlett! My God, what happened? Come inside quickly!" My daughter entered the hallway but didn't hurry to take off her clothes. She stood there, shivering from the cold, looking at me as if she couldn't believe I had let her in. "Dad," she said in a trembling voice, Can we stay? Just for one night?" "Of course you can. What kind of question is that? Take off your wet clothes. I'll put the tea on right away." At that moment, Myrna appeared on the stairs in her dressing gown. "Declan, what's going on?" Seeing her daughter and granddaughter, she gasped, "Hazel! Scarlett! My God, what happened to you?" "Mom," Hazel whispered and rushed into her mother's arms. Myrna hugged her daughter, and I picked up the trembling Scarlett. "Princess, what happened? Why are you crying?" "Grandpa," my granddaughter sobbed, "we don't have a home anymore, and Daddy isn't Daddy anymore." My heart sank. I carried Scarlett into the living room and sat her down on the sofa, covering her with a blanket. Meanwhile, Myrna helped Hazel take off her wet jacket. "Let's go to the kitchen," I said. "It's warmer there. Tell me what happened." We went into the kitchen. I put the kettle on and got some cookies. Hazel sat down at the table, wrapping her arms around her head. Scarlett snuggled up to her grandmother, who quietly stroked her hair. "Hazel, tell us," Myrna said gently. My daughter looked up. Her face was haggard and aged. It was clear that this week had been very difficult for her. "This morning," she began in a trembling voice, "this morning the bank came. They said the house was theirs. They gave us 4 hours to pack our things." Hazel cried, "Dad, we have nothing left. We only managed to pack the bare essentials in one suitcase. We had to leave everything else behind." Scarlett looked up with tear-filled eyes. "Grandpa, my toys are still in the house. Will they take them now?" "I don't know, Princess, but we'll buy you new toys." "Where's Dad?" asked his granddaughter. "Why didn't he come with us?" Hazel and Myrna exchanged glances. It was clear that this was a very painful question. "Scarlett," Hazel said quietly, Daddy isn't going to live with us anymore." "Why?" "Because he decided he doesn't want to be a daddy anymore." I poured everyone some tea, trying to understand what had happened to Trent. "Hazel," I asked cautiously, "where is Trent now?" "I don't know," my daughter replied, wiping away her tears. "When we got home from the bank this morning, he wasn't there. Then I found a note." "What note?" "He wrote that he couldn't take it anymore, that he was tired of the problems and the debts, and that he was filing for divorce." "He left the house?" "Yes, he took his things and left. In the note he said he was going to his mother in Texas to start a new life." "What about you? What about Scarlett?" "He wrote that we were young and could manage on our own, and that it would be better if he disappeared so he wouldn't get in the way of us rebuilding our lives." I felt anger boiling up inside me. Leaving his wife and child at a time like this was despicable, even for Trent. "You bastard," I muttered. "Dad, don't," said Hazel. "Scarlett can hear you." "I'm sorry, but how can you abandon your family when they need you most?" He was scared. He couldn't handle the pressure and ran away. Scarlett finished her milk and rested her head on her grandmother's shoulder. "Grandma, are we going to live with you now?" "Of course, dear. As long as you want." "Will I go to the same school?" "Yes, you will. Grandpa will drive you." Hazel looked at me. "Dad, I'm sorry we came so late. I didn't know where else to go." "Hazel, this is your home. You can come here anytime." "Even after what I said to you?" "Even after that. You're my daughter and nothing will change that." "I was wrong. You warned us and I didn't listen. I thought you just didn't believe in us." "I didn't believe in Trent. I always believed in you." "What will happen now? With the debts? With the court?" "We'll figure it out tomorrow. We'll go to a lawyer and see what we can do." "We don't have money for a lawyer." "We have a house. If worse comes to worst, we'll mortgage it and hire a good lawyer." Hazel looked at me in surprise. "But you said you couldn't risk the house." "I did, but now I realize that a house is for a family to live in, and you are my family." My daughter cried again, but now they were tears of relief. "Thank you, Dad. I don't know what we would have done without you." "Don't thank me. I should have helped sooner." Myrna got up and took Scarlett by the hand. "Come on, dear, I'll put you to bed. You're tired. Will I see my room in the morning?" "Of course you will. We have a room just for you." Myrna took her granddaughter upstairs, and Hazel and I remained in the kitchen. My daughter sat with her head down, slowly drinking her tea. "Hazel," I said, "don't blame yourself for what happened. You did what a wife does. You supported your husband." "I supported an idiot who abandoned us at the first sign of trouble." "You didn't know that then." "I did. Deep down, I knew there was something wrong with him, but I didn't want to believe it." "What are you planning to do now?" "I don't know. Find a second job so I can pay off my debts faster. Rent a small apartment when I have enough money." "Why rent? Live here." "Dad, we can't live with you forever. You have your own life. Our life got better when you came back. A house without children and grandchildren is not a home, just a building. What about Mom? Won't it be hard for her? Mom will be delighted. She missed Scarlett so much. Hazel finished her tea and stood up. Dad, I'm very tired. Can I go to bed? Of course. Mom made up the guest room for you. Thank you. My daughter came up to me and hugged me. I'm sorry for everything, for not listening to you, for what I said to you last time. Forget about it. The main thing is that you're home. Hazel went upstairs and I stayed in the kitchen. I turned off the lights but didn't go to bed. I sat in the dark and thought about how life sometimes takes strange turns. Just a week ago, my daughter and I weren't talking, and now she was home again. Of course, the problems weren't going anywhere. The $27,000 debt was still there. Trent had filed for divorce and disappeared. Ahead of us lay court and years of payments, but the main thing was that the family was together again. I got up, put the cups in the sink, and slowly went upstairs. The nightlight was on in the guest room. Myrna was putting Scarlett to bed. I could hear soft voices. Grandma was telling her granddaughter something. Myrna was already waiting for me in our bedroom. "How's Hazel?" she whispered. "Tired, but she seems to have calmed down a bit." "How are you?" "I'm glad they're home. Very glad." "Shall we go to the lawyer tomorrow?" "Let's go. Let's see what we can do about these debts." "What if we have to mortgage the house?" "We'll mortgage it. We don't need a house if we don't have a family in it." Myrna hugged me. "You made the right decision, Declan. Family is the most important thing. It's just a shame I realized it so late. Better late than never." We went to bed, but I couldn't sleep for a long time. I listened to the rain subsiding outside the window and thought about tomorrow. There was a lot to decide: the debts, the divorce, a job for Hazel. But the most important thing had already happened. The family was reunited. Sometime around 4 in the morning, the rain stopped completely. The house was quiet and peaceful. My daughter and granddaughter were asleep in the guest room. They were home. They were safe. We would figure out the rest somehow. I closed my eyes and finally fell asleep, knowing that our family had to start over. But we would start together, and that was what mattered most.